Hi, I'm Madison Williams with Oklahoma Humanities, here to talk with David Levy about his experience with the organization and his history in the humanities. To start, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
First of all, the name is pronounced Levy with a long E.
Oh, okay.
Not important. Uh, I got my PhD in American history from the University of Wisconsin. After teaching at Ohio State for 3 years, I came to the University of Oklahoma in 1967 and taught American history in Norman for 40 years, retiring in 2006. Don't know what else you'd like to know. I've written probably too many books and too many articles. What's I think most interesting for our purposes is that I was here at the beginning of and involved at the beginning of the creation of the Oklahoma Humanities Foundation.
What was that like?
Uh, in 1970, the National Endowment for the Humanities chose 6 states to experiment with a state-based program. 2 of the states were to try to connect their program with the arts and humanities councils in those states. 2 of the states were to join up with adult education efforts run by universities. And 2 of the states, Oregon was one of them, and Wyoming was the other, were to be freestanding humanities outfits. Oklahoma was to be tied to the Arts and Humanities Council, and the NEH selected, and it was we were joined with Maine. Maine and Oklahoma were arts and humanities experiments. The NEH chose a young man by the name of Jim Vore, Vore, who was connected with the Arts and Humanities Council to start up the effort in Oklahoma. Jim Vore asked Jeffrey Marshall, and that's spelled with a G, Geoffrey, Marshall, and myself to join him. Either Jim asked both of us, or Jim asked Jeff, and then Jeff who asked me. I'm not sure what the sequence there was. But we started meeting. Some people at the National Endowment came to join us in several of those meetings. One was John Barcroft, who later became quite important in NEH. He might have even been the national director, I'm not quite sure. And another person named Lynn Oliver. And we had a series of meetings about how to proceed. Within a year, it was agreed that the marriage with the Arts and Humanities Council wasn't going to work, either in Maine or in Oklahoma. It was too much arts and not enough humanities. And similarly, the 2 states that were trying to link up with adult education and universities also discovered that wasn't going to work. So all became freestanding councils or committees devoted entirely to the humanities. The thing that we had to start doing was to choose a board, collect an original council. I can only recall the names of several of the people who were on that original council. One was a historian named Smurl from your school, Stillwater. One was a very great woman named Ali Beth Martin, who was the librarian at the Tulsa City Council Library, City County Library. There was a guy named Jim Miles from Lawton, and two or three other people who I don't remember. There was also at least one meeting at Roman Nose State Park to hammer out some of these issues. Jim had an assistant named David Marcus with a K, who today we would call him, I think, a program officer. And after a short period, David Marcus quit and either found another job or moved, I'm not sure. So Jim was looking for another assistant. We come now to the part where I did the best thing I ever did for the humanities, and maybe one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I'd become acquainted with a couple who had just moved to Oklahoma from Louisiana. A graduate school friend of mine knew them in New Orleans and said, "You ought to meet these two people." He was a teacher of medical sociology at the university's medical school, OU Medical School. She was unemployed and had a PhD in French history from the University of Pittsburgh and was looking for work. And they were both charming and smart and interested in everything. And I suggested to Jim Vore that when David Marcus left, that he ought to hire the woman, and that was Anita May. And she was his assistant until he left in 1976 to go to the National Endowment for the Humanities office in Washington, where he spent his career until he retired in 2006. He is still living and living in Washington, and you really ought to talk to him. He knows more than anybody about the beginning, and I'm really repeating a talk I had with him last week to remind myself of some of these things. But then Anita May took over and ran the Oklahoma Humanities Committee or Council, various names, for the next 25 years. That's what I recall about the beginning. Oh, one more thing I had to mention. It became necessary to decide what we ought to offer grants for. And it was quickly agreed it shouldn't be just anything. And that there should be a topic. This at the beginning, there should be a subject, and we should award grants to programs that contributed to that subject. And the debate was, should that topic be broad, such as, this was the example, the human condition? Or should it be narrower and more focused? And we quickly agreed that it should be narrower and more focused. And the first theme that we chose was the criminal justice system. And then there were some rules that were put in place that any applicant for a grant would have to meet. First, I've written these down, so let me look at my notes. The project had to be based on one or more of the humanities disciplines. It had to address a public policy issue that was related to our theme, the criminal justice system. It had to involve humanities scholars, and it had to focus on out-of-school adults. And I think it was reasonably successful. One of the reasons for its success was a philosopher that quickly became attached to this effort, this early effort and program, and then who maintained a relationship with the Oklahoma Humanities Council forever. And that was Tom Boyd, B-O-Y-D, a invaluable resource, eloquent, thoughtful, extremely good teacher, and quite popular on our campus as one of the most popular teachers. Okay.
So, what was it like looking for the first board members? Was it difficult at all? Were people hesitant to join the board in the beginning?
The ones that I'm thinking of were anxious to join. And if it was difficult, it was pleasurable as well. Both a nice sense of community and common effort, and on the part of people that we asked, a sort of idealism about encouraging humanities research and public programming. I remember a trip that Jim Vore and I took we started in Altus. How the hell I got to Altus, I'm not sure, but we got in his car and then drove up the western boundary of Oklahoma to Alva, which was his hometown, stopping to talk to and enlist the efforts of teachers of the humanities, people who ran the local historical society, people involved in the museums in these small towns. And I'd say we found a lot of enthusiasm about starting a state-based program in Oklahoma. There was a certain honor to be one of 6 of 50 states to be asked to begin.
Why do you think they chose Oklahoma as one of the 6
I have
states?
no idea about that. I'll tell you the states that they did choose: Maine and Oklahoma for the Humanities and Arts Council, Georgia and Missouri for Adult Education Connection, and Oregon and Wyoming for standalone. But within 18 months, they were all standalone.
You mentioned that these connections with the Arts and Humanities Council and adult education didn't really work, and that you needed to make a separate Humanities Council. Were there any other roadblocks as you were trying to form the council similar to that?
No, there's always been a wish for more money. Uh, that's something that's common in every organization and every university. There's never enough money. Uh, when you choose council members from all over the state, getting together for meetings can be a problem. This was pre-Zoom. Uh, but no problem that was really insurmountable. And I think that was largely due to the wonderful leadership of Jim Vore for 6 years and then Anita May for the next 25.
So, how you stayed with the Humanities Council for quite a long time, right?
I had
Uh,
several terms.
yeah.
I was on the first council, and I think at least two others. I was the chair of the council once, but I wasn't on the council consistently with Anita. I just popped in and out uh, on the council. Of course, I participated in a lot of programs just as a visiting scholar.
Yeah. How did the council change over the years as you popped in and out?
Um, well, some of the members were appointed by the governor, and those members were sometimes quite excellent, sometimes uh, not terribly interested. I thought in the work of and they accepted the honor of the appointment without making a full commitment. But I emphasize that the governor's appointees, by and large, were excellent people. How did it change over the years? I guess the grant making was more sophisticated, got more sophisticated and detailed. Uh, we began to pay, I think, greater attention to the details of the budgets that were submitted. Uh, One major change was the decision sometime down the road that we would have to raise money ourselves rather than relying just on a grant from the NEH. Uh, the organization also became more sophisticated with passing years in enlisting and lobbying political support from both from Oklahoma politicians, senators, and representatives, and also national political figures. There were, I think, maybe yearly gatherings in Washington, D.C., where every state would send a delegation to lobby Congress for larger appropriations. I went to one of those. Those, I think, are the principal changes. Back to your question about problems. One problem was diversifying the council, finding African American humanists who had the time and willingness to serve was difficult. We were never without some representation, but it was hard to maintain and replace people of color who terms were over or who wanted to out. I'll mention that as a problem.
Why do you think they were hesitant to stay on the council?
The problem with being an African American professional humanist is you're asked to do everything. Every university committee calls upon you. And in my experience, if you're as good as the ones who were on the council, you get constant offers for other positions. And I'm talking without having in mind any particular person, and I don't think I could give you any names, but you know, when you're 1% of the available pool of professional humanists, you can do what you want.
So what were some of the big projects or grants that happened in those early days?
Say again? What
were some of the big projects or grants that happened in the early days of the organization? Do you remember?
Not really. The criminal justice system was, then there was an emphasis on rural libraries. And then we just started getting proposals without a theme. Of course, a great effort still today was Let's Talk About It, you know, where local libraries ask for money to put on a program where people in the area read the same book and discuss it on successive evenings, meeting evenings. That's been a terribly successful effort. Maybe, no, I won't say it. It's sort of been the tail wagging the dog, I think. It's been so popular and so much of the money has gone to fund those programs that another great innovation has been the magazine, Humanities, Oklahoma Humanities. It's a brilliant job. And Carla Walker, I don't know if you know her, she has been a splendid editor of that. Do I remember any particular proposals? Oh, they were all over the place. A lot about Oklahoma history, a lot about minority relations, some about Native Americans, but not enough. We needed more. There were some music projects. including videos that appeared on public television and both state and national on music in the time of Columbus and music at the court of Louis XIV and American music as well. Japanese jazz was a topic of one of these videos.
In Oklahoma, we have a large population of Native Americans. Why do you think that there was, a lack of Native American proposals in the organization?
Why there wasn't a lot? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm probably not the right person to ask that question. Those I imagine some might have been turned off by the requirement that there be professional humanists involved in every proposal. Some of the tribes probably had sufficient resources of their own to fund valuable programs for their on their own cash register. But otherwise, I'm not sure. I wish we had had more. There were some proposals by non-Native Americans to study and explore Native American history and Native American Anglo relations.
Which one of the programs, you mentioned Let's Talk About It and the magazine, which one do you think had the most impact?
Well, Let's Talk About It has, I think, a large impact on participants, people who stop what they're doing and go to the local library and read the book. By the way, in my experience leading those discussions, I'm always surprised that at the predominance of women. It's I won't say it's a rare thing for men to show up at those discussions, but they're outnumbered always 3 or 4 to 1 by interested women. But for general impact, you can't top the magazine because it goes to people who don't leave their house and go to the library, and it has a wide readership in the state. And because it's so well done, I think, so both have impact, but both in different ways.
So, they're both impactful, but in different ways. How has the organization impacted the state as a whole?
Well, tens of thousands of everyday Oklahomans have gone to programs. It's pleasant to believe that some of them had their views expanded and their acquaintanceship with ideas enlarged, and that they, I've always felt that there's been a confusion about the two types of benefits that come from the study of humanities. One is what it does for you. you read a play by Shakespeare and it makes you a better person, or you study history, as you assume, as a history major, and you attain a certain wisdom, personal wisdom. There's also the hope that the study of humanities lead to larger than personal social and political change and enlightenment that gets reflected in how you vote and how the state approaches its problems and solves its difficulties and relates to its minorities. That the benefits are more than merely personal, although those are not to be negated. I think that this second aspect has been disappointing. I don't see radical or even substantial humanities caused enlightenment. And I wish that wasn't the case. I think it's benefited countless individuals, making their lives broader and more tolerant and more interesting. But as far as its social impact goes, it'd be easy to overstate that.
So you mentioned that the overall impact of this personal enlightenment, the effect that the humanities has on the state is somewhat disappointing. How do you think what remedy do you think there could be? Like, what could we do to fix that in the future?
It's hard to tell. First of all, some of the power to do that is not ours. It's the educational apparatus that the state provides and funds. That's fundamental, I think. The state needs to do a better job of educating its young people and including in that education humanities disciplines. And there's hope in the rising generation that there's polling seems to indicate that there's a more openness to tolerance and to wider experiences and less narrowly traditional mores and habits. I also think there's hope for I don't want to sound snotty about this, but as more people move into the state from other places where these things are more common and expect them here, that's going to help. And also, Oklahoma has been benefited by a group of philanthropists who pour money into the things that you and I would applaud: museums and orchestras and colleges and universities and libraries that encourage humanities research and programming. So I'm not without hope, but uh, uh, but I'm 83. You do the math. Will I see it?
Do you feel like Oklahoma Humanities Council picks up where the education failed, or they attempt to fix what they failed?
I wouldn't put it that way. I would say it tries to add to uh, humanities content in public programming. Uh, I don't think it consciously says, let's see how we can fix the school system. No. It's been, by the way, a long while since I've been on the council or connected in any way except an occasional let's talk about it effort. So if you're interested in the contemporary efforts of the council, there are better people to talk to than myself. Have you talked to Anita May?
No, I have not. I believe another intern got her interview. But I have talked to other people that you have mentioned. I'm interviewing Carla Walker here in the next couple weeks,
Mhm.
as well as some other people who have been on the council. So
Jim Vore still lives, Washington, D.C.
I believe he's on the list.
Good.
I can double check though.
You'll find if you talk to him, and you should, even though what I'm about to say, a lot of what I said about the origins, I picked up from Jim in a talk we had last week as I was cramming for this interview with you. I also called Anita May this morning to ask how we met. It was in 1968, and I think I got her machine, not her, but I think I got it right that my friend from University of Louisiana, New Orleans, brought us together.
So you mentioned that the humanities kind of brings personal, enlightenment, education, uh, and there's obviously some other social impacts of the humanities. You're still in contact with people who were there at the very beginning of the organization. Uh, do you think that the humanities has allowed you to maintain these relationships? That humanities fosters the relationships.
Yeah, I think so. Just as you always find it easier to maintain relationships with people who share your interests. Um, Truck drivers hang around with other truck drivers because they have a set of common interests. And um, I hang around with people who read books and like to talk about them and who have not only humanistic interests, but educational and higher education interests as well. And I think our backgrounds enhance those relations. Yes.
Um, do you think that you learn from each other?
Yes.
Uh,
Sure.
you get different perspectives.
You get different perspectives, and you also get recommendations for books and articles that you ought to read. And yeah, I've learned a lot.
Um, so you taught at OU for quite a long time. How did your work with Oklahoma Humanities influence your work at OU? Were you able to use some of these new perspectives?
I think it worked mostly the other way around. The things I learned by teaching uh, ended up in my participation of uh, in programs, in humanities programs. The other way, I guess you get a feel for uh, what people want to talk about that carries over into the classroom. And you get a, feel about how to talk to, how to uh, encourage discussion and lead discussion that must have had some effect on my teaching over the years. I wouldn't be surprised.
Um, were you able to encourage any of your students to help to join the organization, to join the council?
Um, any of my students?
Or maybe not join the
Yeah,
council, but receive grants, take part in organization, and
yeah.
let's talk
I,
about it. And
I've had some students, now that I'm thinking of it, who have been on the council. Uh, uh, and a lot of students who have participated in programs and been part of grant uh, applications, maybe not as originators always, but as uh, scholars. Uh, uh, and I have encouraged colleagues to join the council. Both colleagues both at OU and those that I know around the state uh, as well to join the council. Uh, but I think there's a very wide interest in among the state's professional humanists, that is, professors, in the activities of the council, and a lot of sympathy and support. Uh, I haven't mentioned a program that came along over the years, and that is the research grants that the council makes to individual scholars who are willing to uh, convert that research into public programming as well as into publication. That's made a large group of fans for the council among professional humanists in Oklahoma.
okay, um, I believe that's all that I have for you today. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
Um, I I've been looking for papers that I've accumulated. What should I do if I find them? Should I put them in my own paper collection, or should I send them to you?
If you feel so inclined, you can send them to me, or you can send them to someone at the organization. I'm not exactly sure who, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
if you find them, anytime here in the next couple weeks, you can send them to me,
Yeah.
and I can forward them on to the organization. Yeah.
A lot of what I found are my notes from when I was on panels to give grants in Washington. I've done that 7 or 8 times. But I have a folder on the National Conclave where we went to lobby the one time I went, and folders on being on the nominating committee for the council, but they'd only be useful, these things, if there's going to be a written product. If it's going to be a series of these Zoom talks, then you don't want papers. Right?
Well, they could be supplemental to these talks, especially if someone is doing research projects over the
All right,
organization.
let's agree that if I find anything that I think would be useful in that way, I'll send a copy to the office in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Good, and it's been nice talking to you. You've asked intelligent questions, and I hope something useful emerged.
Okay, well, I enjoyed talking to you. It was an absolute pleasure.
For me too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a great
Bye.
day.